Hello and welcome once again to the Many Rules of Film Club, which, by the way, you can find on iTunes, and you can go to our website, manyrulesofilmclub.com, go to Facebook, check us out. My name is Jeff Yance. I'm the program director at the Loft Cinema, and I'm joined by my cohorts in cinematic insanity, as always, occasional filmmaker Heather Lattes.
Hi, Jeff.
Hi, and multimedia artist Rusty Boulay Stevenson.
I got to do that again. Oh, I practiced it. I had it all down.
What?
It's not working.
Rusty's lips are a little chapped. He's trying to whistle.
So. I'm trying to whistle. Let's try it again. No, it's just not there. It's just not there. Okay, so I'll do something else. I asked him if it was going to be a harsh winter.
Ooh. I'm a little nervous about that. Cryptic. I know what you're talking about, but we'll circle around to it.
That's right.
Okay.
It's a little cryptic. Welcome, everyone. Today we are going to be talking about someone I think who is probably one of our true auteurs, our cinematic auteurs today, the great Wes Anderson.
Agreed.
So Wes Anderson I find interesting because I think Wes Anderson is like an old school director in that he has a very strong vision. You can always tell a Wes Anderson film pretty much from the first 5 minutes.
Yep.
Or maybe from the opening credits, actually.
Yeah.
And he is a sort of industry unto himself. He also has a real look, which I like about Wes Anderson.
That's true. He has
that
his
he
own
has
style.
cultivated his own style, a la Alfred Hitchcock.
Mm-hmm.
Where the floppy hair, the
Yeah.
corduroy suits, the big ties. So he is definitely someone that you can always trust if you like his style that you're going to like his next movie, I think.
Yeah, and I think he's the director of our generation. So I would say
Yes.
people from 30s to upper 40s. That's like he's a director from our generation. He's probably one of the best.
Yeah, and he uses the music in his movies that really hits our nostalgia keys kind of perfectly. Without it being too spot on, he still picks out songs that you recognize instantly and then just become part of his films. And I think that people of, I'm 40-something, of our generation, we really appreciate that. The David Bowie and the Beach Boys and,
The Kinks.
The French guy. I can't remember his name.
Sir George.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
He has excellent musical taste. Some of the best musical taste, I think, in film today. And so do you two look forward to a new Wes Anderson film? Is he a filmmaker when he has a new film coming out, you say, I am going to see that in the theater when it comes out?
Without a doubt.
I've done that with everyone except for Grand Budapest Hotel, which I have no idea why I didn't.
Oh.
But
That was his biggest movie.
That's the only movie besides Bottle Rocket that I never saw on the big screen. But
wow.
yes, in general, I do. And it's whenever you see the trailer, you know immediately it's a Wes Anderson movie. And yeah.
And I'm pretty excited. I remember when Isle of Dogs was coming out, when they just released the cast, I was excited. You knew Bill Murray was going to be in the next Wes Anderson movie, but still seeing that
Yes.
had me very excited. And just the entire cast had me just pretty stoked to see it. So there's almost no director who gets me so excited. Maybe Paul Thomas Anderson, maybe Quentin Tarantino, but I think Wes Anderson is if I'm going to go see it because of a director, it's probably him.
Yeah. And you also know you're going to get, as you were alluding to, a great cast because he has a great eye for casting and he has sort of a stable of actors.
Oh, yeah.
Interesting folks. Angelica Houston pops up a lot. Of course, Bill Murray.
Luke and Owen Wilson.
The Wilson Bros, yes.
Ed Norton.
Ed Norton. Maybe a little Willem Dafoe if you're lucky.
Now, yeah.
Yeah. So we'll be talking about his signature style as we sort of go through his oeuvre. But he started at the University of Texas. So I think he's a late 40s. So I guess he would have been going to school in the late 80s, mid to late 80s.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's about to turn 50.
Yeah.
Oh, no, he turned 50 earlier
50.
this year.
Yes, that makes sense.
May 1 is his birthday, May Day.
So he sort of came of age as a filmmaker around the same time as the Tarantino, in that Tarantino era,
Yeah.
early 90s. Went to school at the University of Texas, studied philosophy, which I find interesting, not filmmaking. But as we were talking about, a lot of great filmmakers, I think, study philosophy in school, which is interesting.
Yeah, one of the Coens, Terrence Malick, both philosophy majors. It's kind of interesting. It makes sense when you think about the subtext of films and what films are, too. They make us think about life, and they make us think, the best films do, right? They resonate inside our soul somehow.
Right.
And so I think it makes some amount of sense, but it doesn't strike you as obvious until you start thinking about it a little.
Right. And interesting, that's also where he met Owen Wilson, who was at the University of Texas, which started that whole partnership. But someone from Texas, Wes Anderson always strikes me as someone with a very European sensibility.
I do. I never would have guessed he went to
a
West.
Texas boy. I would not
he
have
was
pegged him
Texas,
if I didn't know. But certainly his films feel a little Luc Besson or Jean-Luc Godard.
Definitely
or
European.
Francois Truffaut. Yeah, you can see all those references, and I think a lot of those are not American references, which is interesting.
Right.
So he brings sort of the art house European sensibility to commercial movies in America, which I think is great. So I'm curious how the two of you feel about this, since we're all Wes Anderson fans. Some of the criticism leveled against Wes Anderson by people who do not like Wes Anderson is that he's a one-trick pony, that he's got a look that he uses every time, a style, a kind of a general atmosphere, themes that he approaches over and over. And the word I often hear from Wes Anderson haters is twee, that he's too twee. And what do you say?
What the hell does twee mean?
Twee means too, like a very
Kitschy,
cutesy,
like
kitschy,
cute,
cute, kitschy, annoyingly
like all
so.
flash, not much depth.
Yes.
Okay. Well, I don't. That's BS.
Yeah,
but
okay.
That's just BS.
Okay,
That says Heather.
It is BS.
Well,
it's true.
I mean, yes, for sure. He's got a look, and I don't think that it's honestly repeated in every movie. I think that they mistake that. I think if you look at, the two of the ones we're gonna talk today is Life Aquatic and Moonrise Kingdom, and I think if you're not paying attention, you think those look similar, but they really don't. They really look different, and I think they're mistaking his knack for precise and colors and precise set decoration and a theme that goes through the whole movie as the same, in my opinion. I think those are so different. Darjeeling Unlimited doesn't have the same look that but it's concise. Everything in the frame is picked for a reason. The colors on the train are picked for a reason. What they dress in, picked for a reason. But they're not the same. So I think people mistake his approach for being the same kind of movie over and over again.
Well, I think that speaks to him being an American filmmaker who is sort of incorporating European art sensibilities into his films. I don't think we're necessarily used to seeing that from an American filmmaker. But in Europe, you see a lot of that, very careful compositions.
Stylized, if you will.
Yes. And you see thematic elements and visual elements in European cinema. But in he's a big commercial filmmaker on a huge scale, and you don't see that kind of filmmaking often on that scale in America.
No.
So I think sometimes people don't know how to read that, or they read it as annoying.
Yeah, he does have quirky characters.
That's true.
The quirk is there in most all of his films, right? And he does have the notion that these people who aren't as great as they think they are, right? It starts with Bottle Rocket. Those criminals are terrible criminals. They're terrible at it. But they're so into it, and they're so certain that they're going to be successful. That is something you see a lot of.
Yeah, the kids in Royal Tenenbaums show great promise early on and then flame out spectacularly as adults because they don't quite understand that maybe they're not as special as they thought they were. And that seems to be a recurring theme.
That's right. Ash and Mr. Fox, I'll talk about Mr. Fox later, and Ash and Mr. Fox's son, really wants to be great at things, and he isn't. He's a little more aware of it than some other Wes Anderson characters, and it kind of pains him to know that he's not as good as Christopherson or as good as his dad wants him to be. And the father figure is something that crops up a lot in Wes Anderson. The one thing I would say, and pointing at Mr. Fox or Isle of Dogs, is you can't say that his style is the same when you look at those two films. He takes stop motion animation to a whole new level in those films. The fur on the animals and the fur on the dogs in Isle of Dogs is amazing. Like, the texture of it is just, it's a sight to behold. It's really, that was the thing when I saw Isle of Dogs first that really caught me, was just how much nuance is put into all of these things. And that you can't, that doesn't translate to, even though he's very careful about all of his cinematography and all of his composition, what he does in those two stop motion is a whole different level of it. It's a whole different way. And so in that way, you're really selling him short if you think that his films are all going to be the same.
Right. And one thing that does speak to me about Wes Anderson is his appreciation for ephemera and stuff. I do have a big fondness for stuff in my own life. Mm-hmm. My house kind of looks like a Wes Anderson movie in a lot of ways. And that's what I really appreciate, the attention to detail. I think a lot of, particularly like big commercial films, don't really pay attention to things that are in the background, things that are in the apartment.
Yeah.
And he's clearly very, very careful and interested in building a universe.
Oh, yeah. And I don't necessarily think it's a universe that connects through the movies, but I definitely think it's a universe within each movie. In my opinion. I know some people have talked about the connections of his movies, but he's never said he's done that. But he does say that he connects the small things to the little thing, small things to the big things in each of his movies.
Well, so maybe we should just talk briefly. You mentioned Bottle Rocket. So that was his first film starring the Wilson brothers, Owen and Luke. And Bottle Rocket is the first Wes Anderson film, but it doesn't feel like the first quote-unquote Wes Anderson film because it's different.
Yeah.
I feel like he didn't develop his style as Wes Anderson until Rushmore, which was his next film.
Yeah, for sure.
But Bottle Rocket's very entertaining. It feels different.
It's a very dude movie. I mean, it did, honestly, I remember being in film school and I'm oldish, 95 through 99. And all the guys loved Bottle Rocket, all of them. And I did watch it and it was good, but I did not like it as much as they did. So it's kind of a dude feeling kind of movie. And I think as he moves on in his career, you get the more well-rounded feeling.
It's kind of a bro caper film if you haven't seen it. And James Caan is in it, which is very dude-like.
Right.
But it feels from that era, the Tarantino era, the Richard Linklater era.
For sure.
It felt like a lot of male directors at that time were doing that kind of film.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But then I think after Bottle Rocket, he found his voice as we know it today with Rushmore, which has all of the elements of Wes Anderson, I think, that we know and love now.
It's got Bill Murray.
It's got Bill Murray. That's the big one.
Jason Schwartzman. I mean, honestly, seeing him that young and doing that role is so great. To look back now from where we are now, but in revisiting that, it's interesting to see his career too.
And I think that was the first film that really introduced this idea that I love about Wes Anderson films, the idea of life as a stage. Mm. So there was play acting within the movie at the Rushmore Academy, putting on the play, and there's believe the movie opens with curtains on a proscenium. So it really seems like you're watching a stage production, which has been a theme throughout his career.
Yeah.
The great music, the British 60s music, really makes that film, I think.
And as we kind of discussed, Max, the main character played by Jason Schwartzman, he's involved in so much and he wants to be so great. And at times he really is certain that he is, but all of his clubs fall apart. Very little of it actually works. And I've read that Wes Anderson kind of feels that's what he was like a little bit, in that he felt like he was super great when he was young and then needed to live up to that somehow. And so you see that with the Jason Schwartzman character for sure in Max.
Yeah.
Whose dad is a barber.
Yes. And Max is annoying, but also inspiring, which I think is the thing with a lot of Wes Anderson characters.
Absolutely.
Like, I can see myself in that person, but you're really annoying. And I think it also started this idea of the missing father, the conflict with fathers and sons, that is a recurring theme in Wes Anderson films. And the kind of melancholy that Bill Murray brought to that part also became a real recurring theme, I think. Kind of wacky humor, but with a real kind of underlying sadness. And Bill Murray's face is that hilarious and sad.
Yeah,
we
it
have
is.
So
talked
he's
about
really
that
the
in our-
perfect.
in our podcast before about his.
Oh, that
his
face.
is, yeah, it really it was around this time that he kind of discovered it a little bit earlier, but didn't start using it until this time, really.
Right. Yeah. So, and then of course, Royal Tenenbaums came, which I think is one of his best films,
Groundbreaking,
probably.
like, yeah. And yeah, well, overall, I think it's probably the best.
I think Wes Anderson fans call that their favorite movie.
Right. If not,
Yeah.
most favorite. Bridges on the best, yeah.
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 It's easy to watch. It's really easy to watch.
Well, not for everyone though. I think that it's funny because I've watched that one and Darjeeling Unlimited with people who are not Wes Anderson fans, and they hate them. Well, because there's not. I mean, his movies are about characters and their backgrounds and the visual of it. It's not necessarily about a strong through action or a mystery or a devastating incident, or it might be a small devastating incident, but but then you really see how it affected their life. It's not about that impactful moment that people are used to with Hollywood movies, and they have a hard time with that. They have a hard time of his movies just kind of end. I think they usually end at not necessarily a solution, but I think they usually end at a good place. But people want that nice bow gift box, wrapped up for them, and that's not what you're gonna get with a Wes Anderson movie. So
No, and one of the worst dads in a movie,
Yes.
for sure. So talking about father-son conflicts, father-child conflict, this movie's got it, and it doesn't really end again in a Hollywood sort of way where the dad is sort of redeemed in any way.
but it's
Much
honest.
like life.
Yeah, that's
Well,
honest.
he shouldn't be redeemed.
No.
Right.
His actions are beyond redemption, really.
Right.
Honestly, I mean he's not ultimately. If you really look at what he's done some
You
pretty
can't
awful
be redeemed.
things.
Right.
for that.
Yeah, you can't.
And this is a movie, I think, where he really came into his own in terms of costume design and set design. Like,
That
that
was the
movie
full
is
look.
stuffed with stuff.
Yeah.
There's this overflowing with just ephemera in the background and things on coffee tables and on the walls. Every painting is interesting looking.
Yes.
The color scheme, great. There's great Halloween costume potential in the Royal Tenenbaums.
Oh yeah,
If you ever want to go as a group, go as the Royal Tenenbaum kids.
Absolutely.
that would be fun.
Really, yeah. I love that movie.
It's Gwyneth Paltrow's second best role ever.
After
next
what?
to oh my goodness, I'm blanking
You're
on
not
her
gonna say
name
Pepper
again.
Potts.
Yes.
Pepper
next
Potts,
to Pepper
I thought,
Potts.
yes.
Those are her two best roles that have ever existed on film. If you mention any other roles, I'm going to disagree with you. But she's great in this movie.
This is the first time we see Angelica Houston in one of his films too.
Yes.
And
Yep.
she becomes a staple, and she's really great in his movies.
Mm-hmm.
And just real quickly, yes, how many times have you seen the tennis player now
Right.
as a Halloween costume?
Oh my gosh.
Right? I see it from hipsters all around.
Oh, yeah.
Everybody knows, and you know immediately when you see it. It's pretty great.
Oh yeah, and Luke Wilson with the falcon arm and Gwyneth
Yeah.
Paltrow's ratty fur
Yeah.
coat and the fake finger, and it's pretty incredible.
When I think this was like one of the beginnings of, I think it's great that he brings older actors in and their big roles, and a lot of mainstream movies are not going to do that. He gives them juicy roles that I think people want to be in his movie, even if it's not a big one.
Yeah.
So, and he's not catering to actors that are 25 years old, for the most part.
Right, which is something he shares, I think, with Quentin Tarantino. Sort of an eye for casting maybe actors that have quote unquote passed their expiration date
Right.
in Hollywood terms.
But are phenomenal.
But are still but great and need to get cast more.
Right.
And he does that. I have a lot of admiration for that because a lot of actors just sort of pass out of favor,
Right.
and it's kind of sad,
Particularly females.
particularly
And
females.
they could be making great movies if people would just write a script for them.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So this leads us to his next film, which is, I think, with Royal Tenenbaums, my favorite Wes Anderson film, which is Life Aquatic with Steve Zissou, which was his fourth film. And I would never argue that this is his best film because it's, to be honest, kind of a mess,
It's
I think.
Yeah.
But I love it. And I think I love it because of the flaws. I tend to really love movies that have deep flaws in them because it makes them interesting to me. And this film, it has all the elements I love. It's got the father-son conflict. It's got weird, quirky details. So basically, if you haven't seen it,
Lots of weird.
it's probably, I would say it's the weirdest Wes Anderson film, I think. We can discuss.
Yes.
But I think it could be.
You've got a good point. There's a jaguar shark in it.
Yes.
I forgot about that. Why did I forget about that?
Bill Murray seeking revenge on the jaguar shark who ate his partner. And
Kill that shark.
chasing the shark on his shipping vessel called the Belafonte. Clearly modeled after Moby Dick. And also an homage to Jacques Cousteau, the famous oceanographer. And of course, just the sight of Bill Murray in a blue spandex bodysuit.
With the knit cap.
With a knit cap. I mean, that kind of seals the deal right there.
More Halloween fodder right there.
Major Halloween fodder. But you also have to be very confident to wear that suit
Oh yeah.
out in public.
It's not.
Sure.
It's not forgiving.
No, it is not forgiving, but it is very rewarding if you can pull it off. So this movie really, I think, continued his great eye for casting. Jeff Goldblum is in it, Willem Dafoe, Angelica Houston, Kate Blanchett, Noah Taylor, who is a great actor, a British actor who kind of had a career in the 70s and didn't get cast a lot in the 80s, and then he sort of came back in this film. And really, what I love about this movie is that it's about a father-son reunion. So Owen Wilson is possibly the long lost son of Bill Murray in the film. But I don't want to spoil it if you haven't seen it. And there's a lot of tension, like really kind of wacky tension in that sense. And they're on a boat together underwater. There's a lot of great stop motion animation in the film. And of course, the music, the Seu Jorge Portuguese covers of David Bowie songs, which I think for a lot of people became more famous than the movie itself. I think a lot of people know the Seu Jorge score, the soundtrack.
Yeah.
Maybe who didn't even see the film, because this film was not a huge hit. Hipsters loved it. But it didn't really hit with the mainstream population, because I think it is, as I said, kind of a mess. The narrative is very choppy. It's episodic. There's a lot of vignettes and weird incidents, but it doesn't really have a plot per se.
And when they get off the boat, like when they go to the island,
Yes,
it
pirates,
gets, like,
and there's
messy,
pirates.
It's a little extra messy there.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's funny, but that scene that could have been redone a lot of, or chopped down a bit, But
It's like a movie that a kid would write. It's like, I love all this stuff. I love sharks. I love pirates. I love the ocean. And just like
we cram it all in.
Cram it all in there. I love stop motion animation, which
I love movies about movies.
I love movies
right,
about
that's
movies. He has said that he was a big fan of the Jacques Cousteau TV specials in the 70s. So it's sort of an homage to that. So it's kind of like a kid in a playroom, and he was given full indulgence by Disney, of all people.
That's crazy.
Yeah, to do whatever he wanted. But I think what made this movie, to me, great, but also is what killed it for a lot of people, is the ending, which I don't want to talk about.
Yeah.
But it goes off in a very kind of shockingly downbeat fashion.
Sure.
And then immediately bounces back into a wacky finale.
Yeah, you're like, it's like a bit of whiplash at that point.
Yeah. And that was maybe a bit of a misreading of what audiences would accept, but I admired the fact that he didn't know or didn't care. He said, this is the story I want to tell. And he did. And I think it hurt the movie's chances, but I think the movie found its audience later.
Yeah. It cost $50 million to make and didn't quite make 25.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Ouch.
So that's a pretty big bomb.
Yeah.
Ouch.
And I don't like Rotten Tomatoes, but I think it's interesting to point out that it has a 56% approval rating
Rude.
on Rotten Tomatoes.
Yeah, critics were very confused about the tone. Like, you read a lot about the tone. Like, we
Yes.
don't know is this a comedy? Is this a sad tragedy? Is it a...
And now I just want to say it's a Wes Anderson movie.
It's a Wes
so-
Anderson movie. That's what it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The deadpan style is so deadpan
Maybe,
that it does confuse audiences, I think. If you're not used to a Wes Anderson film,
Agreed.
this isn't going to be a movie where you just step in and you're like,
No.
oh, I like this.
And it seems like
Right.
it's going to be an adventure film, like even an action film, because it got compared a lot to Moby Dick. And there is a shark that he's chasing, a jaguar
that.
shark. But I would not call it an action adventure by a long shot. And there's pirates. There's a pirate
Right.
attack. Maybe it is an action adventure
There's
now
yeah,
that I
and
think
then
about
there's
it.
The never, the always. Are you my father? Like
The tragic comedy,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think is where it falls. But I just think a lot of the public would not recognize the comedy of it.
Right. And it's also about middle-aged malaise because the Bill Murray character is young enough to still have time to achieve grand ambitions, which he's trying to do. He's trying to make this, and he's also trying to make the film about killing the jaguar shark that killed his partner, which is sort of a
redemption.
comment on filmmaking and clearly, I think, kind of based on Wes Anderson. But the Bill Murray character is also old enough to have regrets about things that he didn't do, perhaps with his son. So I think it's that kind of middle-aged malaise that Wes Anderson got early on, because I think he was only in his mid-30s when he made Life Aquatic. But it's about that kind of middle-aged regret, which a lot of filmmakers don't come to until much later in their life.
That's true. Or they don't start making movies till their 40s or 50s, and
Right.
Yeah, he's 35 when he makes this, or when
Yeah.
it comes out.
Yeah. So so he was ahead of the curve. He didn't wait to be regretful, which I kind of like about him, because now I feel like he's even lightening up a bit, which is interesting. But maybe we can kind of talk about that. So maybe he went through the heavy phase early and came out light later. So
I have a theory as to why you might like this one even more. I just realized it has Bud Cort in it, and
I didn't even mention Bud Cort.
Yeah, and you were a fan.
Big Bud Cort fan from Harold and Maude. And
oh yeah, that's true.
This is an example of Wes Anderson casting great actors who no one knows what to do with anymore. And Bud Cort, a highly unusual performer, to say the least. And I don't think he did many movies after this. He still didn't get used. And
No, I don't think so. And it's not a big role at all. He's the Bond company stooge.
Right. But just the fact that he's there is great.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I'm sure he's been used since, but not a lot. Yeah, he has. He was in Arrested Development. He was in Justice League.
Yeah, I guess, yeah.
A lot of stuff that I don't care about. And a lot of other stuff. Because I care about Arrested Development. I'm not saying I don't care about it.
Yeah. But we'll credit Wes Anderson for maybe giving him the entree back into film. If people for some reason skipped Life Aquatic with Steve Zissou, I would say give it a shot. It's not a perfect film, but it's pretty great, I think.
Agree. It's fun.
Yeah.
Just the set design alone and Bill Murray's deadpan style, you should watch it for that. If you like those things,
Yes.
then, I love the cutout of the ship, right, where you see half the ship, right, and it's going through and showing you all the different rooms and stuff.
Oh my gosh, the Belafonte, the ship, is like a marvel of set design.
Yes.
Like that.
Yes.
Yeah, that alone is worth the price of admission just to look at that boat.
Yeah.
But that's a good thing about Wes Anderson films. You get more than you think. You're not just getting the story; you're getting the world around the story. And I think that's why he's a great filmmaker. So, kind of moving on through the career. So he, I think, sort of rebounded after Life Aquatic with Moonrise Kingdom.
Well, actually, Darjeeling Limited.
Darjeeling Limited.
And
yes.
he doesn't rebound here, actually.
Not with that one.
Because
No.
this is,
People didn't like that one either.
even as a Wes Anderson fan.
I enjoyed it, but
I like it, but it's really flawed. And it doesn't feel like he's got his whole heart into this one. It's what I kept feeling like. It's a sweet movie. It's easy to sit and watch. It's on cable a lot, I find. And so I find myself just watching it from the middle somewhere. And
It's beautiful. The color palette
Yeah.
in Darjeeling is just amazing. And I know that he was referencing Satyajit Ray, the great Indian filmmaker. So I think it was sort of an homage to him that maybe didn't translate perfectly.
Especially if you've never watched any of those or know much about
the
Indian,
Apu trilogy.
But I appreciated just a little quick note on it is I appreciated the relationship between Angelica Houston and the boys, her sons. And I think that was something that he doesn't delve too much into mothers much.
He doesn't.
Not really. They're like just a little bit. It's more about the father relationship.
I think he had a better relationship with his mother. That's the impression I'm getting. I don't know exactly what the real story is.
Yeah, I don't either.
Right.
But I feel like the dad was the problem.
Right. And
Allegedly.
That was, it's still a messy relationship in that movie all around, but that was a nice, very nice performance from her. And the guys are great. I enjoyed it, but definitely not for everyone. People that I watched that movie with did not like it.
Yes.
So.
And Adrian Brody sort of got added to the cast list, the Wes Anderson universe. And I think he's a good Wes Anderson character.
Yeah, he's a great addition.
Yes.
I watch Adrian Brody in about anything. I'd be happy.
Yeah, I would too. Yeah.
In Darjeeling Limited, he's really great. And I love Angelica Houston in it. I'm with you again. I'm a big fan of hers anyway. And once Wes Anderson starts using her in films, he picks just brilliant parts for her. Mm-hmm. And writes just brilliant stuff. And most of his stuff, we should mention, he co-writes with a lot of different people. For instance, Darjeeling Limited was co-written with Roman Coppola and Jason Schwartzman.
Yes, and Life Aquatic was co-written by Noah Baumbach, who is also a great filmmaker in his own right, of course. So he's a collaborator. Which is
absolutely.
Nice. So then, moving past Darjeeling, then I think we get into some films at the
Mr. Fox.
Fantastic Mr. Fox.
Fantastic Mr. Fox, 2009. I tried to whistle like him. I couldn't do it.
I knew what you were trying to do. Oh.
It's just not working. I was doing it in the car ahead of time. It was all... and then the clicks. But so Mr. Fox, the Fantastic Mr. Fox, is based on a Roald Dahl book. It departs from it quite a bit, but there are still elements of the story that are very much intact. I think that his two stop motion pieces are his two most political films. Mr. Fox and his family represents the 98%, and then Bogger Bunsen Beans. Those guys are the 1%, right? They control everything. And so Mr. Fox starts out the movie, he is a chicken thief. And he finds out that he and his wife get trapped when they're taking the scenic route home. And they get trapped, and he promises if they get out, he will leave the life of crime and become an upstanding citizen because she is pregnant. She's glowing and she's pregnant. We then cut to years later. They've got their son, Ash. I don't know how many Fox years it was exactly, but they've got their son, Ash. And Ash is an oddball. He's different, is what his mom says. And now Mr. Fox is a journalist. But he's really come, and the crux of the film is Mr. Fox's existential angst. Here you've got a fox asking, why a fox? Why am I a fox? Why not something else? What does that mean? Do people even read my article? Do your friends read my column? And so in that, he decides he's not going to live underground as foxes are supposed to, but will instead inhabit a tree. So they move above ground and across the way from the three farmers, Bogger, Bunsen, Bean. Bogger, am I saying that right?
I think it's Bogger Bunsen.
Yeah. Bogus
right.
Bunsen Beans. Bogus Bunsen Bean.
Okay.
Are the
very
three
Roald
guys.
Dahl.
And so the three farmers, they all raise different things. And so now Mr. Fox decides with his handyman possum friend that they will rob the three. He's going to do one great heist, but his one great heist is in three parts. And he will rob everything from them. He does that, and the farmers don't like it, and so they completely obliterate his tree home, and the animals, all his animal friends, are forced to go underground, and it's a bit of a caper flick in that way, I guess, which is kind of interesting. But the movie is really about, like I said, is about Mr. Fox and trying to come to grips with his mortality, that he won't live that long. His father barely lived as old as he was in this movie. And so it's really an interesting take on that. Everything about it is gorgeous to look at, just like we talked about before. You've got a very stylized color palette, which kind of gives it, even here, I think what I call Wes Anderson stuff is like hyper realism, in that he oversaturates all the colors all the time, right? So you get that here too, but now with stop motion. It's really one of my favorite films. I can identify with Mr. Fox as artist who makes stuff, and does anybody care? Does anybody even see what I made last week? And so I'm middle aged, and so I can really identify with Mr. Fox. It's one my son and I can watch anytime. We owned it and loaned it to our friend Peter. He had it for about a month, and in that time we rented it twice from Casa Video because we just like that movie so much. We just like to watch it a lot, and so my son and I we really love it. There's also the attention to detail in the background. At one point, there's a fan that's oscillating.
Yes.
And it's in the background. And when you think about what that takes for stop motion animation to be doing that in the background.
And it serves no narrative purpose.
None at all.
He just put it in to add texture, and that's what he does.
Yeah, and that's what he does. And it's done really brilliantly here. Some really neat stuff that's kind of behind the scenes stuff about the movie. Wes Anderson got to go to Roald Dahl's home, and he spent time with Roald Dahl's widow, and he spent time in his cottage, like going through his notes and stuff. Like, cool. Pretty cool stuff. It's pretty neat that he got to do that. And then I also saw in some of the extras, and I hadn't thought about it, but in making stuff myself, I will have, I try to give actors cues that even if it will be added later, I'm working on an animated piece right now, we'll still have the cues there so that they can react to it. So he had the actors all together, like actually acting stuff out. So when you see Bill Murray, the Badger, he's the lawyer, and George Clooney, the Mr. Fox, they start are you cussing with me? Are you cussing with me? And they're wild animals. So they actually did that in real life, and there's footage of it, and that's hilarious. And it's interesting because I never knew that I was such a George Clooney fan, but he's in two of the movies that I watch the most. One of them, Mr. Fox, and the other, Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? And in both of them, his voice is just brilliant in this. And then Meryl Streep is Mrs. Fox, and she is brilliantly understated in it. She is so good in this movie as the voice of Mrs. Fox. It's one of my all-time favorites and easy for me to recommend and to watch over and over and over again.
I love it, and I was not surprised that Wes Anderson did a quote-unquote kids movie because I feel like he has that kind of childlike sensibility,
yes.
even in his very mature middle-aged malaise movies. He's kind of keeps that childlike innocence.
Well, I think Rushmore is very much that way, right?
Yeah.
Max is very childlike.
Yes.
He's just certain that he can do all the things. And so, yeah, I think it's not that big a surprise. And that he would come back later to it with Isle of Dogs, which we'll talk about that briefly. But I think that's his best film is Isle of Dogs. Also, it's got a political bent to it in the undertones. Great music in Mr. Fox, too. There's some pretty funny stuff. Yeah. It's one of my all-time favorite movies.
And just speaking of him making Fantastic Mr. Fox and adapting Roald Dahl, I had always wished that Wes Anderson had been the one to remake Charlie and the Chocolate Factory rather than Tim Burton. I like Tim Burton a lot as well.
Sure.
But I think Wes Anderson would have made that movie. That seems to me like a Wes Anderson movie waiting to happen.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I enjoyed the Tim Burton's version, actually, but
I did too.
I think that he might have made it better. Wes Anderson might have made it better.
Yeah, I just think he has the right sensibility for it.
The right sense of quirk and deadpan.
Yeah, and also that kind of
needed.
He has that knack of getting like the sadness out of the Willy Wonka character. I think he could pull that out. Whereas I think Tim Burton made the Willy Wonka character like insane and eccentric.
Right.
But the Gene Wilder version of the 70s version of Willy Wonka, he's sort of like a sad adult who's passing on his legacy to this child. And I think that's totally Wes Anderson.
Yeah, boy, that's a really interesting point, Jeff.
Yeah. So maybe someday if we need a third Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, I don't know if we do, but
Yeah, I don't know.
if you're listening, Wes.
This is off the topic, but I was glad that they remade Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. I think it needed an update. I really did. I don't think Tim Burton's is perfect by any means, but when I watched the old movie, it's really dated in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I like Gene Wilder in it a lot, but there are lots of things about it that are clunky, honestly, from a modern standpoint. And so it needed to be updated. Again, I don't know that Tim Burton, I'm sure it's not perfect, but I still liked it. I'm with you, Heather. A lot of people panned it, and I find it very watchable.
I
Yeah.
enjoyed it.
Yeah, I
Well,
enjoy it.
I'm always going to be the supporter of the original, but that's just me.
Most people are. Most people
Yes,
are.
yes.
But I also think that that's just nostalgia for a lot of people. And I'm not
Yeah.
saying that
I
necessarily in your
honestly
case.
have never seen the full version of that, and I don't care to. but
Oh.
maybe one day I will. But
Yeah.
all of the scenes that I've seen, give me a creepy version of.
Gene Wilder?
Yes, give
Yeah.
me like a creepy feeling for him.
Yeah.
And yes, the Johnny Depp version does, but it's like a comical creepy. But the original, not necessarily comical. I don't know. Maybe one day I'll watch it.
Yeah. I like the original because it was it was dark in that very 70s way where you could basically dispatch of these children and not see them emerge unscathed at the end. Whereas in the remake, we had to see the kids
Aren't dead.
they haven't been murdered by Willy Wonka.
Which they
So I
clearly
can't
were.
support that really.
I
But
get that
anyway.
part. I get that part. I understand where you're coming from.
But anyway,
That's true. I get
Anyway.
that.
It's really a tangent.
that was a major tangent.
Side tangent.
But I've always thought Wes Anderson could pull it off. But anywho, and then kind of moving along to, I think, a film that you admire a lot,
It
Heather.
is honestly my favorite Wes Anderson movie is Moonrise Kingdom. And I watched this movie with a friend who is my friend Jake, and he's a fellow fan of Wes Anderson. And my face hurt from smiling so much through
Yes.
this movie.
Yes.
By the end of the movie, I was like, why does my face hurt? I'm like, I legit was smiling through the whole movie. I mean, there's definitely some moments, but it's the most, I would say, dear to my heart for lots of reasons. But it's basically the story of Susie and Sam. And they both, he catches her at a play one night, and I can't remember which play she was performing, but in the play she's birds. She's one of the birds, and he
That's right.
just gets so mesmerized by her. And let me get their names because they're great actors. They are Susie plays Kara Hayward. Kara Hayward plays Susie, and Jared Gilman plays Sam. They're such great. It's kind of a joy to me when you see kid actors on screen that really were made to be. And for Kara Hayward, when she auditioned to play Susie, Wes Anderson said that she just said her lines like she was Susie, like she was like not reading them. And he was like, at the minute I saw her, and then in between, like when the casting director was giving her directions and how she was speaking, he was like, she has to be Susie. Anyways, but so these two young kids, about 12-ish, and Sam is this young boy who's repeatedly rejected by his foster parents. I don't think you get the story of why he ended up in foster care, but you get the flashbacks of him being in like a dreary foster home, and when he's found, when the foster parents are asked, he's here, we can send him back, and they're like, well, we don't want him back. And so you get that immediately, and then you see the snapshot of Susie's life, which she lives in that life of a big house in this like Nantucket like place. Feels very northeastern U.S., like in the 50s, 60s. The mother is played by Frances McDormand.
Yes.
And there's Bill Murray plays the dad, and a house full of other kids, younger kids. She's the oldest kid. She's the daughter, and I think it's 3 other little boys that live there. And she feels very ignored. There's lots of implications about the mom and dad relationship in that. Like, there's lots of framing where they're separate, like where he'll be in one doorway, she's in the other doorway, and they're not obviously a happy couple. And here Susie and Sam make these arrangements to go meet. And what's funny is like you're whistling about Fantastic Mr. Fox. They do that like sort of whistling in
That's
this
right.
to meet up and stuff. So he's part of Boy Scout-esque group called the Khaki Brigade, I believe. And they're all in khaki, led by Ed Norton. And he's gone away on a camping trip. And he sneaks out. And he makes arrangements to go meet Susie in these very detailed, go up this road, turn this way, and they make their way to meet. And they meet up, and it's just very matter of fact. And I think sometimes lots of people were saying that it's like a child's book. Like, and the allusion to the fact that Susie loves to read books. That's what she does. She even on her trip to go meet Sam and rendezvous with him and run away, one of her suitcases just has books. I mean, I think it's hilarious. She takes a suitcase full of books, a little basket with a kitten, and a record player. And I don't see much other thing. I mean, there's some clothes in there, but not much. But her keys were, I mean, like, what other little girl wouldn't want to take books, kitten, and a record player? I mean, you know, and you adjust that for technology and time. That's what most.
Not great for surviving,
right?
But
no.
That's what you would take.
No. And then you have Sam, who is in the Khaki Brigade. So he thought of, you know, first thing is, I made some beef jerky. Do you want some? And just like, it's all very matter of fact. And I think that some people get put off by the dialogue because it's just so straightforward. And they're just two kids. And kids at that age are not going to BS around most of the time. They're going to tell you exactly how it is. And so they go run off, and they're getting chased by the Khaki Brigade because Ed Norton is the leader of the Khaki Brigade, and he needs to go find him because he's responsible for this kid. And it's all very, you know, the standard Wes Anderson khaki colors are there, the yellow tents, and the pastels, and a lot of pastels with her, and then they're running in the woods and trying to get away from the Khaki Brigade and stuff like that. And that's when I didn't honestly see it until I went back and watched it again. Was there really is a moment when they're like, it's when the kid gets hurt. One of the kids get hit, and you can see like there's blood. It's not like a lot, but she like shanks him with her little kid scissors. And then sadly the dog gets shot and dies. And it's a very like that moment when you're a kid, when the first thing you have dies that you ever loved, or that moment, not even necessarily that you loved, but that you realize that things die. I think is the moment in the movie where it changed to the kids, and they realize, oh shit, we got, like, this is real. And so they run off, they get away from the Khaki Brigade, and they go onto their own little island. Or like, yeah, I think it's that part of the island.
Yep.
And it's their own beach. You know, it's the beach that they can, it's a very romantic, but in a juvenile, innocent way. You could, I think, and I'm sure people did, but there's like a point where like they're both dancing in their underwear, and
it's like Blue Lagoon, but
right.
but not smutty.
Right.
Yes.
And not like forcing, like, to me, like, it was so important. They're not trying to force sexuality on these kids. They're just portraying them as kids, and most 12-year-olds aren't going to react that way unless they've either been shown that or, you know, mostly been exposed to something that perhaps was too early. And so it's just so innocent, and all he wants to do is, like, he'll start repeating her. He'll say, what do you want? And then he'll just repeat exactly what she said he wants, because he wants her to love him so much, but in that way of, anyways, it's a typical, it's just as a typical, you know, when you're 12 and you have a crush on somebody and you think your whole world is them, that you're going to run away. And to me, I think it's also very book-like in that, I mean, a lot of the time that I read as a child during that time, when that age, were books about that, where kids were running away because their parents weren't either listening to them or said they would run into something. And so I think that made me feel like it was very storybook.
There's a visual motif of chapters, right?
Right.
Yes.
Chapters,
like literally,
then,
it's like a book.
The next thing happens, and, you know, they get chased, the storm happens, and then in between that, you see the adults arguing over the kids. You get the great Tilda Swinton as the version of CPS. She's come to save Sam Shakowski, but does he really need to be saved? And when they need to save him, because the storm, of course, so the peak of the story is when the storm comes in, and But before the storm comes in, they like want to get married. So like the cute marriage of Sam and Susie, but it's not really a marriage, of course, but like the pretend marriage. And then when they're at the main after the storm's about to come, but they go meet Harvey Keitel in it's like the main camp of these kids. And Harvey Keitel plays such a funny side character, of course. But all of that is such a journey and action. The action comes in when
there's an action-packed finale to this movie. Like, seriously.
And how
the storm comes in, and then then they're trying to get back in, and I think they keep there's such a dichotomy of the way the kids react and how they're talking to each other versus the adults. That is so important because that really is, in a way, how life is. And for me, it was like, if you don't pressure your kids to grow up so fast, maybe they can live in this life a little bit longer and feel like, I mean, not really run away, but you know what I mean? Like, be fantastical and think about these things and let them be kids for a little bit longer before they have that harsh world come in and creep in. And it's Moonrise Kingdom is such a prime example of Wes Anderson's purposefulness of everything. And I didn't notice it. This is one other thing I didn't notice was there's a phone operator that connects. Well, okay, I'll back up a bit and say Bruce Willis plays the police captain who is also searching for Sam and Susie and tries to, but he's also on the side having an affair with Susie's mom. And that's a very grown-up situation that happens. And they don't ever have the kids confront that, really. It's just the grown-ups, and it happens between the grown-ups. But how sad. It's so sad because she says, I have to do what I have to do. I have to take care of myself and my family. And he's like, that doesn't involve me. And she's like, yes, it doesn't. It's very matter of fact. So in a way, it's kind of said like a child, but dealt in an adult situation. And so anyways, he's trying to communicate, and there's this scene where he's speaking with the operator to Tilda Swinton's character about asking about Sam, where is he safe, etc., and finding out that he's lost and that we don't know where he is. And the operator is such a small role, but I didn't realize it, and I don't know how many times I've seen the movie. I should have realized it. She's basically becomes a love interest of Ed Norton's character. So if you follow throughout the whole film, she's in there. And at the end, she's out by Ed Norton's side. It's just an interesting side, very small piece, but it just shows that everything he puts in that movie is purposeful. And the way they shoot the house and the levels of the house, where they have a crane. They have a crane so that crane can go, from the top level to the bottom and move around through the house to see how they are a family, but they're all very secluded family in their little rooms.
Yes.
And
the symmetrical composition. Like, that's the movie I've really noticed it.
Yeah.
Right.
To the nth degree was the symmetrical composition was in Moonlight Kingdom.
And how everything is there for a reason. Like,
yes.
Even her record player, I love that thing because I remember as a kid seeing those. I didn't have one.
I had one of those.
Seeing those. And the interview that I was watching with Wes Anderson was saying, it's so interesting for him to hear him say it, but to say, it's so good to see dailies because you're seeing it all come together. And you're like, but as if there was a doubt in his mind.
He knew what it was going to look like.
That this would all come together. Like, how can he doubt that? He planned so well to get all of this together.
Who storyboards more than Wes Anderson?
Right.
I mean, that movie is planned out
funny.
before he ever shoots a frame of film.
It was interesting to hear him say that, so I don't know how far that goes really, or if he's just playing with us. But I just love this movie so much and how the kids save themselves, really. I mean, sure, they got themselves in this situation, but they were running away for a reason because they were being ignored, i.e. her real family was ignoring her, and the foster family didn't want him. So I feel like they solved their own situation in the bigger picture, and then, it was so sweet that it didn't end with them, like Susie and Sam breaking up. It just kind of went with them both realizing they needed to go live their lives, and here Sam found a life to live with the captain, with Bruce Willis's character, could be his father-like figure, someone who wanted to be his father-like figure. And then here's Susie going back to her family, which maybe not be the greatest, but she still has a mom and dad and, a place in their house. And so it was something like, it was the most grown-up thing I've seen kids do in a long time.
Yeah.
So I love this movie. It's, to me, my favorite. And I think, like, story-wise, it's great. It's intertwining all of those characters that he always has, like the multiple, Ed Norton's, Bruce Willis, Frances McDormand, all their characters intertwined in this little island community. And
yeah, that movie to me seems like one of the best films that I've ever seen that's captured what kids would do in a particular situation. Mm-hmm. If there were kids on an island living their own life, right. Mm-hmm. That's exactly how they would behave. And I feel like he's just really tapped in to a kid's imagination, which is why I want to ask you, do you think he's a good parent? Because he's a parent now in the last few years.
I think he's probably a great parent.
I think he would be a great parent.
That's why it changed some of his, I'm sure that affects how you direct in stories. But, because, what comes after? Grand Budapest is very different comparatively in a lot of ways. But anyways, I think he's a great parent probably, but I think it's probably affected some of how he's telling his stories.
I think his deadpan style of delivery works amazingly well with children doing it. Because children are deadpan. Right. They a lot of times don't realize how funny they are, right? Like adults are laughing and snickering like, oh, he just said he's young. Or back when he was young or whatever, But these kids, they have the deadpan delivery, especially the young girl. Her delivery is amazing. But it feels so right in this one. More so, I love it in all of his films. I love the way he gets his actors to deliver lines. But in this one, when the kids are doing it, I love it even more.
It fits the most.
Yeah. It fits the most.
And I've heard people criticize that as being too stylized. Oh, that's not how children really talk. But I don't necessarily need to hear kids saying, whatever, to be realistic. Like, he's creating an alternate universe almost. It's his own specific universe. Right. And these kids are kind of hyper articulate.
Yeah.
And I think that's fine. I don't see why, I don't understand faulting him for trying to create a different reality.
Right. And I think that
it's not
kids
a documentary.
Are like that. They might not be non-emotional, they might not be deadpan, but they are honest to a fault sometimes to the embarrassment of their parent. But they are seriously, like my niece once said, sometimes you got to poop your pants. And I found that hilarious.
Of course.
But it's true. That you may, whatever age you are, you may find yourself in that situation. Right. She didn't find it funny and didn't understand why I was laughing my ass off, but that's how kids are. And so I think people forget that because the deadpan kind of overshadows it.
Well, and they are overly articulate. Again, it's the hyper-realism, right? Sure. Like, kids don't say the stuff that these kids said exactly. But again, that's what he does. It's very stylized. But I think you're dead on when you're saying stuff like that. Kids say stuff that's hilarious, and they don't say it for effect. They don't, not always anyway. Right. They don't say it because they're laughing when they're thinking it. But gosh, as an adult, when you hear kids say stuff, a lot of times you're laughing at it. Right. I imagine teachers are laughing half the time they're in their class all day, right?
Well, and he takes the kids seriously and their feelings and their emotions. And this is just a mild digression, but one of my pet peeves in movies featuring children is when the kids say, "That's totally awesome." Like, it's adults writing for kids,
kids would never say
in a way that kids don't really talk.
Yeah.
And so Wes Anderson also is at least being true to the feelings of children, even though he's giving them this kind of hyper realistic dialogue.
Yes.
But I feel like it's true to the core of a child.
For sure. And I think even if you're even if you don't have a traumatic childhood or a difficult childhood, you do get to live your life as a kid in a fantasy world lots of times. We give them that opportunity. And then, of course, we want to yank it away from them later and say, no!
Grow up!
Right. But they do, whether it's them watching a cartoon and then later on imagining that cartoon or reading a book and imagining that, we give that to them. And I think he's showing us that because I think this is kind of a mixture of real, but also like, it's a dream of a kid to be able to run away and live with their friend for a while and chill without parents because parents are necessary. Of course, in the end, you do realize you do need some parents and stuff, but
a little bit.
But
whatever.
But it's he hits home with kid things very well in this movie.
And then speaking of growing up, I think a lot of people consider that he grew up as a filmmaker with Grand Budapest Hotel because that was the film he was nominated for the Oscar for Best Director finally. Even though it's got all of the wacky elements of Wes Anderson, but it's a little more subdued, perhaps a little more restrained.
Yes. It's got all of the things that we've been talking about. The look, it's got its own look of this made-up hotel. It's not real, right?
Not real. Not real.
No, of this made-up hotel. And
that looks like a pink cupcake. This
right.
hotel, the pink hotel.
And then like her Shorsha's when she's baking, oh my God, they're so beautiful. I wouldn't want to eat them. They're so pretty. But yeah, everything's got a look in this. The hotel, the bellboy, everybody. And it's a great, I think, like we had talked before off mic, that it's his most accessible, palatable movie because I think it doesn't go as deep as you could with this. Like, you could go deeper because there, of course, is the father figure situation and the whole idea of growing old and holding on to things for only sentimental reasons.
Right.
But then there's the madcap in between of them trying to find the painting and that kind of thing. And that's fun and very good comedy by Wes Anderson.
And there's that toy sled race, which
Yeah, that.
I will forever love. The toy sled race.
And like the weird Willem Dafoe being the guy who's after them. It reminded me of like in silent movies when they would show the bad guy and he'd be like fast motioning and like that Willem Dafoe was very much that character in the Grand Budapest.
It's interesting that you say the toy sleds, and immediately then I was reminded, of course, of
Rosebud.
Yeah, of Rosebud, right? Of Orson Welles, and Royal Tenenbaums is so much like Magnificent Ambersons. There's so much Orson Welles in his work, and when you mentioned the silent films too, the end of Moonrise Kingdom, when they have that feels so much like an old silent film.
Oh yes,
with the storm and everything. I love those moments, and the way he's obviously so steeped in, pardon me, so steeped in Hollywood, and as far as that goes, the Life Aquatic with Steve Zissou. When we're looking at the sets, that at times, and in Moonrise Kingdom, where you're talking about when they move through the house, that's also another Orson Welles shot, right?
That's true.
Oh, it's very Touch of Evil.
Yeah, very Touch of Evil.
And people don't often mention the Stanley Kubrick influence, but I see Stanley Kubrick in every Wes Anderson film in terms of the deliberate camera work, the gliding camera, the symmetrical compositions.
The deliberate pieces of art direction and
where everything was placed in every part of the frame for a reason. That's very Stanley Kubrick. Yeah.
That's true. I didn't know. I wouldn't have thought of either one of those.
It's also David Lynch having the stuff going on in the background. I mean, in Twin Peaks, you see that so much. With just this extraneous stuff that doesn't tell part of the story but adds atmosphere. David Lynch really, really made that very popular with the Twin Peaks series.
Yeah. And those little side character relationships don't tell Sam or Susie's story better in Moonrise Kingdom, but it adds to the feeling of what you have there.
The texture, right?
And all of those little moments of like for example, in Grand Budapest, was when they're going to save the will of the old lady that dies, and you're trying to look at all of the characters, but all of them are doing something different, or all of them are reacting different. And I had to watch it a few times to catch everything.
And that's that European sensibility, I think, because it's not all plot driven, and I think Hollywood films tend to be very plot driven. If it doesn't service the plot, we're not including it. Get rid of it. But he's showing just the life being led around the plot, which is great.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing about the Grand Budapest Hotel is I don't want to watch it over and over again. I've watched it a couple times now, but I've seen Moonrise Kingdom like at least 10 times now. So that's one of my, and Tannenbaum's at least 10 times now. So
it's not the one that speaks to me emotionally.
Right.
Yes.
Like I think it's brilliantly directed and written and photographed, but it doesn't feel as emotional to me. As those other earlier films.
It's a clear homage to the history of Hollywood, right? I mean, I feel certain that it is.
Sure.
More so than any of his other films, even though they're all steeped in film knowledge.
It's kind of a Jerry Lewis movie. In a lot of ways also.
Right?
You know.
Yeah. No, and so, but I agree with you. It doesn't hit me in the same way. It's fun. It's a rollicking thing, that never stops moving and just
Right.
keeps gaining steam as it goes. And I love that about it. But I'm with you. I don't know how many times I would really watch it. I loved watching it. The first time I watched it, I was just enraptured. And I was like you with Moonrise Kingdom. I was smiling a lot.
Yeah.
Because you just see so much Hollywood in it and so much of film tradition in it, and that just made me happy. But it doesn't have the emotional resonance of Mr. Fox or Moonrise Kingdom as far as that goes.
Yeah, it's a crowd pleaser, and it's not surprising that it was his most popular
Right.
film.
For sure.
I don't know that it will become one of his cult films that people return to over and over and over again. So
Right.
that will remain to be seen. But then, kind of catching up to modern day, Isle of Dogs, his second stop motion animation film, probably his most mature film
Yes.
in terms of themes and structure. It's pretty amazing. It's pretty amazing.
It's a dystopian near future Japan.
Yeah.
And dogs are causing an outbreak, and so they have moved all dogs to Trash Island.
Yeah, so there's a real sort of refugee kind of theme to the film. And what was great is that the Japanese in the film is not subtitled. And there was a lot of talk at the time, so will people be able to understand what's happening? Which doesn't give audiences very much credit, I don't think.
Right. That's true.
No, and I think within the
In the context,
exactly,
made no difference.
It didn't matter. It didn't matter a bit, and I kind of loved it for that.
But he said he didn't want it to clutter the frame. He didn't want subtitles cluttering the frame because he's so meticulous about what the frame looks like.
And it's gorgeous. It's
It's
absolutely
beautiful.
gorgeous.
Yeah.
And you're right. It's almost like when a photographer puts a watermark on their photo, it kind of ruins the photo for
Sure.
me. That very much. I mean, every frame of Moonrise Kingdom is gorgeous too. But every frame of Isle of Dog is immaculate, right? Isle
Yeah.
of Dogs. It's amazing to me. It's an amazing film.
Yeah.
And when you look at how meticulously it was made, I mean, the amount of time and energy and effort that went into every one of those shots is really astounding if you
Mind-blowing.
think about it for
Yeah.
long. Yeah. You can see the fleas crawling on the dogs and like the fur moving. And
Oh, yes.
I just loved that. It's not I saw it in the theater and I saw it with my friend Peter, and Peter was laughing a lot out loud. To me, I don't laugh out loud when I watch it. There are a couple moments maybe. It's a more serious film.
It is kind of
To
sad.
me,
It's
then-
sad and
Without a doubt.
tragic and
Yeah, without a doubt. And it's a movie really about a boy and his dog, and that's really sweet to me.
Mhm.
I really love that, and I love the adventure of going to find him and everything that we learn along the way. It's really a great film.
Yeah, I think it will stand the test of time for sure. And it also does just bring up a brief thing about subtitling in films. This is a great incentive to learn every language because I watch a lot of foreign films. I love foreign films, but subtitling on foreign films can be very distracting
Yes.
from the visual composition that the director has created.
It can. Yeah.
And you're reading the film and you're often missing some of the visual information because your eyes are down at the bottom reading the subtitles.
Without a doubt.
So again, learn every language. That way you can watch every film in its original language and then you don't have to worry about it.
Then you don't have to worry about it. It's interesting, just as another side jaunt here, it's when I watch films that are subtitled, sometimes when the subtitles are just white without a drop shadow or without an outline, the words start getting lost in the picture.
Sometimes.
I am distracted down to the bottom, which is never what the filmmaker wants you to be doing, is staring at the bottom of the film. Right. And so and then when you try to fix it, like I've seen people use yellow subtitles, and at first I was like, I love that, but that's even more distracting.
More distracting. It's very bright.
Yeah.
Well, you realize though that you're making a prime argument for dubbing, right?
Which is terrible.
No,
Like,
I can't.
I'm just gonna throw that out there and say that's exactly what you're doing. But also, like, sure, it is there for if you don't know the language, of course, but it's also there for people who can't hear, so
Yes.
so there are purposes for that.
That's right.
It's true.
I think that we need to figure out something else, but I don't know what else to figure out. So
Yeah, I don't know what it is.
Or like you could maybe place it where you want it in the screen, like you could digitally move the captions to where an area of the screen you find more acceptable. Granted, directors would hate that, but I don't know. I feel like that's user friendly.
Speech bubbles coming out.
Speech bubbles. Because there's a reason supposedly they don't put subtitles at the top of the frame because so much of the visual information is at the top.
Yeah.
They don't want it over people's faces.
Right.
But that would certainly prevent you from having to look down.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, sometimes nowadays I will actually have the captions on and I don't have hearing issues. I have good hearing according to my recent hearing check, but what happens is that the music is mixed too loud. This is a total side techie jump, but music is often mixed too loud for the dialogue. And so either I'm going up and down with the volume or I'm just watching the captions. And sometimes that happens because, it is what it is. But those are things that we have to deal with nowadays. We're so spoiled.
And there's never an excuse for dubbing unless it's an old Godzilla movie or an old Kung Fu movie.
Right.
Then I'm fine with it.
Or an
I
old
don't like
Italian
dubbing,
Western,
but,
maybe.
I mean, I'll watch it if that's the only version available.
Yes. Sidebar.
Sorry.
For sure.
That's it. But this has been great. So Wes Anderson, I think, will continue to delight us. Who knows what he'll come up with next?
He's coming out with a new one. I can't remember what it's called, but it's like in a year or two.
Yes, I think 2020 is coming out.
Yeah.
So I want to do real quickly. Tell me your 3 favorite Wes Andersons. Jeff, can you do that?
Yes. Life Aquatic with Steve Zissou, Royal Tenenbaums, Moonrise Kingdom.
And what about you, Heather?
Royal Tenenbaums, Moonrise Kingdom. The third one's hard. I'm gonna have to say, I would say it's either between Darjeeling. I enjoy that one, and Grand Budapest.
Okay, so I would say Mr. Fox, Moonrise, and Isle of Dogs. And I think that that's really great for his career because we're seeing him continuing to get better.
Yes, he's maturing as a filmmaker.
Yes, for sure.
It'll be interesting to see what else he comes up with as he goes on.
So is there one of his that you wouldn't watch if it came on? It's on
Bottle
cable,
Rocket.
you're flipping through. You wouldn't watch Bottle Rocket?
No. Maybe I should watch it again since I haven't seen it in probably 10 years. But I've never wanted to watch it again.
I love the scenes where he's falling in love with the maid at the hotel. What's her name? It's so sweet. I forget, but
those are nice, but that doesn't overcome the other stuff that I don't want to see, that I don't need to see. Like this is a total another genre which we should talk about one day as a podcast, but there's an overwhelming amount of multimedia to consume these days, and I'm very choosy about what I see and what I watch again. So it's not something I need to watch unless I almost watched it again for this podcast, but I didn't have time. So
Inez is the maid's
exactly
name. And I really enjoy that. That's one of my. There are some of those scenes where he's talking to her and she doesn't understand a word he's saying. Some of those scenes are maybe some of my favorite Wes Anderson scenes. Like I love that interaction there. It was just so sweet and just. It's not my favorite Wes Anderson at all. Bottle Rocket. I
mean, there are some movies I'll watch just for certain scenes, and then I'm like, I'm not watching the whole thing, but I'll,
I may have to throw Rushmore in instead of Moonrise Kingdom because I'm thinking about how important Rushmore was to me when I first saw it.
It is, that's true.
It spoke to me so strongly because I felt like, I was that kid.
Maybe. I need to watch Rushmore again.
So a lot of it's nostalgia. Like, does it hit your own personal life?
Yes.
And I felt like that movie did.
That's true.
In a pretty strong way. For me, I'd watch any of his movies again.
Yeah, I mean, I probably would skip Bottle Rocket, but I would probably watch it if there was nothing else good on.
Darjeeling is my least favorite to watch, but I still will watch it anytime it's on cable.
I should watch it again just to figure out
I'll
why
watch
I like
it
it so
again.
much. But
I would watch it with the sound off.
Oh, because it's so beautiful.
And I have it just in the background. Beautiful.
That's
I could
true.
be reading a book and look up and.
Honestly, I don't really
look at
want to
it.
ride a train in India, but it made me want to ride a train, even though it's not even a great ride at all.
Yeah.
I was like, if I could ride like a 30-minute train ride, I would do that.
And I'd say if you're lucky enough to get to see his films on a big screen, that his movies
Oh,
were
yes, for
made to be
sure.
seen in a theater
Highly
because
recommend.
you lose a lot of visual information on a TV or a laptop or a phone.
I'm lazy now, but I will, if I can, always go see one of his
Yeah.
movies in a theater.
Yeah,
Yes.
he's probably the one that I will go out of my way of
Him and P.T.
everybody.
Anderson, I will go.
Paul Thomas Anderson's the other, and like I said, Quentin Tarantino. I think they're the
Yeah,
three
that's
that. Oh, Jim Jarmusch. I would probably go see any Jim Jarmusch film.
Yes. I would have said Terrence Malick until the last 2 or 3 Terrence Malicks.
Yeah.
Cup schmups.
But his new film, Hidden Life, maybe, I hear, is going to be a return to form. So we'll see.
We'll see.
And David Lynch. But he's
And
not.
David Lynch.
But he says he's not going to make films anymore. I don't know.
Whatever.
And John Waters, wherever you are,
yeah.
if you would make
We need
another movie, I would
one.
go see it.
Good Lord.
This is great, Rusty and Heather. That's great. So yeah, revisiting the work of a great filmmaker is always a good time. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Jeff. That was
Yeah.
fun.
Thanks, Jeff.
Let's remind everyone that we can find the Many Rules of Film Club everywhere: iTunes, Facebook, our website, themanyrulesofilmclub.com. Like us.
Stitcher, if you're so
Stitcher.
inclined.
Stitcher, yes. Yes.
So,
And you may be so inclined. So this brings me to rule number 901 of the Many Rules of Film Club, which is if you're looking to get your motor running and head out on the highway, but you're running out of gas, why don't you watch a great road movie? Because it replicates the experience without actually having to go out on the road. So next time we're going to be looking at great road movies here on the Many Rules of Film Club. So thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time on the Many Rules of Film Club.